Russell Lawley from the product development team at the British Geological Survey has joined us today. So huge thanks to Russell for being here. He's going to talk to us about the geological map data that's available within Geology Digimap, and hopefully give us perhaps some use cases as well of where their researchers have used the data. So we're looking forward to it. We've not had anyone from the BGS do one of these sessions before, so really excited to hear from Russell. So over to you, Russell. And yes, people, please just keep your questions coming into the chat as we go along. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Russell Lawley. I'm from the British Geological Survey. I started my career at BGS 31 years ago last month as a survey geologist. So I'm hoping there's a few survey geology students out there who are looking to have a future in geology. Right, so I'm going to talk about our products that exist in EDINA Digimap. Obviously far away with the questions, and I will try and pick them all up at the end. So a little bit first about British Geological Survey. If you're not aware of who we are a research centre. We operate under the Natural Environment Research Council, and we're part of UK Research and Innovation. There are now 600 of us, or thereabouts, and we're dotted around 5 offices in England, where our head office is, Scotland and Wales, and also in our sister organisation, Geological Survey of Northern Ireland. What most people don't realise is we don't just do pure geology, we do the whole raft of geoscience topics. So as well as their 5 main offices, we've also got a lot of dedicated science laboratories. So some people are aware we do a lot of geomagnetics and geodesy around the globe. So occasionally you'll see our space geodesy facility in Hurstmonceau on BBC. They like pictures of lasers being fired at satellites. So that's one of ours, just for a little bit of non-mapping background there. So we kind of like work across as many areas of geology as we can. We are split into a series of science programs, which are on the left. So we have 3 main science areas. I'm going to try and persuade my pointer to work, which might help. Hopefully you can see a laser pointer. So we've restructured in the last couple of years. So we have a decarbonisation and resource management group, which is a bunch of scientists who are looking at carbon capture and storage, geothermal heat, mineral resources. So kind of like traditional geological activities, but rebranded for a decarbonisation and resource management future. We have a multi-hazard and resilience team, which is where you'd find out earthquake specialists and volcanologists, but also people who deal with engineering matters in the environment. And then you have our environmental change. So this is where a lot of our climate scientists, our hydrogeologists, our soil scientists now work. And then I'm about to show you the outputs of our national area, which are basically cross-cutting group of scientists who produce national geoscience, and they also do global geoscience. I used to work in this group. I now work in the data and science area. So this middle group here are all our science, technology and transfer groups, and this is where we arrange partnerships with people. We provide facilities to researchers such as yourselves, and we carry out all kinds of data analytics. And our customer base, it has changed over the 31 years I've been at BGS, but we still have an active role for the UK government, a lot of global work. We still work with industry. It has kind of like changed its flavour over the last few years. Things have become greener. But we also work heavily with universities and public. So we currently have 100 PhDs associated with us, and I've lost track of the number of universities where we actually have active products. It's over 150. And of course, we answer to the public because they pay 40% of our salaries. So I'm here to talk about these products, which I believe are the products that you can acquire through EDINA Digimap services. I will start at the top and make my way down to the bottom. So I'm going to cover the 10, 25, 50, 250 and 625K maps individually, because they're probably the ones you use most. I will also touch upon marine geology, because that's had a massive growth in uptake in the last couple of years. These lower maps down here, so the 65K scale hydrogeology, these are legacy data sets. I won't talk about this very much, but I will talk about soil parent and superficial deposits, because both of those also come out of my team. And the geological indicators of flooding, I'm not going to talk much about this one, or the onshore boreholes, or the lexicon, or the permeability. I will happily field questions on any of those later on, but right now you can just go and grab this data and play with this. You don't need me to tell you about these. So let's see, persuade this to work. Okay, so BGS Geology 10K and 25K. On the left-hand side of your screen, you will see our current 10K map that you can access through your service. It's version 2.18. And the really embarrassing news that I have to say is, yes, it is dating back to 2012. And over on the far left is the BGS Geology 25. Now, these are supplied as 5 layers of data: a bedrock, a superficial, a linear features layer, and then artificial materials and mass movement where they've been mapped. This is a standard setup for our higher resolution data sets. However, we are looking to change things. So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk today is we are about to release BGS Geology 10/25K, which is the first hint. We are merging our 25K into our 10K data set, and it is due in February 2022. There's not a huge amount of additional coverage. You'll have to look quite hard to spot it, but there are parts of Wales where we've put new data in. One of the reasons why we haven't changed very much new content is we've had to do an awful lot of work with the old content to make it work. So one of the themes of today is to talk to you about how we're trying to change what we do and how we do it, so that future generations of geologists have a slightly easier time than my generation have had in terms of getting hold of data and making it happen. So half my team are currently working on version 3.24, which, as I say, we're hoping to have a sign-off and a publication early next year. And half my team are working on version 4, which are additional files that we will release hopefully in 2024, probably early. If we can get it in 2023, we will. And these are legacy sheets which, for technical reasons, have been trapped in limbo on our servers. So we're hoping to get these completely redrawn and recrafted. So BGS Geology 10K is our survey scale. It's the scale that the geologists will go into the field and work at. And it's really for site-specific use. So if you end up as a geologist working on a construction site anywhere in the UK, that's the data set we kind of like expect you to use. We will eventually complete the coverage that we hold for this data set. And we hold about 60% of Great Britain's landmass we have at 1 to 10,000 scale. It's just that not all of it is currently digitized. We have a massive backlog of paper archive that we need to capture. So that's the 10K. The 50K is the data set that most people play with. So this one is version 8.24, which is the version you have access to, and we published that in 2017. Over on the right, the next version will be version 9. We haven't formalized a release date for it. It's slated for 2023. And it's going to be an interesting one because, again, just like the 10K data, we're trying to look at things that we need to address. So I'm really pleased to say that we have a geology team out in the sunshine today, working in this little part of Wales. That little grey rectangle is the sad, miserable geological sheet known as Knighton, or sheet 180. And that is a geological sheet which has never had a full 6-inch or 1 to 10,000 scale survey. So we're fixing that right now. It'll be the last formal sheet that we'll ever map in that way. And we're hoping to release it, as I say, in 2023. Alongside that additional sheet there, and if you look around, you can just about see little rectangles popping up in the map now, where we'll be releasing updates for those areas as well. The main things we're going to be focusing on in the next few months, and we have been focusing on during lockdown when we couldn't get into the field. We have a revised fault database because we had an accident with our fault database in 2013, as some of you are aware of, and a revised unconformity database as well. And we have compiled corrections for about 35 geological sheets. So there's a lot of work to go into this 50K product. So there's a lot to do, but it's all coming along. Slowly, but it is coming along. Geology 250 is a really popular scale for students to work with. And we normally only provide it in a bedrock and linear features layer. It's quite an old data set now, it's 2004. During lockdown last year, we decided to do an ad hoc review of the data, and we discovered there were a few issues with the data set. So this data set has been handed back to the national team, and they are undergoing a full review of the content. Their intention is to come up with a new bedrock layer and a new superficial layer and a dedicated fault database. The data content will be derived from the 50K database, but semi-automatically generalized to be suitable at 250K scale. So what a lot of our users don't realize is that we manage our 10 and 50K data sets completely independently of our 250 and 65K data sets. That will be changing as well. The intention will be we'll host one source of survey data, and we will create multiple scaled versions using semi-automatic techniques. So the onshore geology is going for a rethink, and we'll be going back to stakeholders, and that may include yourselves, to ask for advice on how would you like to see this data in the future? What kind of content and what kind of advances would you like us to make with this data set? Obviously, this onshore data set was designed to work completely interoperably with the offshore data set. Unfortunately, over time, they've diverged in terms of content. So again, I've asked the marine team who work with my area to review the 250, and we've already identified some critical upgrades are required for the marine hard substrates. And also we need to advance some of the higher resolution coastal models. The marine department, for various recent advantage in sensor technologies, can now start to make 50K scale data offshore. And so that's rapidly becoming the standard scale for our outputs. So there's an awful lot of work to be done on the UK continental shelf. So we expect to update hard substrates around about 2022. And literally in the last week, we've had a query from Channel Coastal Observatories and also Crown Estates about the quaternary thickness model, which is really old, and they would like an update on that. So the quaternary thickness, which is the offshore equivalent to our onshore superficial thickness, is going to be revisited as well. So we think that'll be about 2024, but we can't be sure. So basically, most of the maps that people are using through EDINA are going to have some kind of upgrade soon. It'll just be different things in different layers. And good old BGS Geology 625, it's showing its age a little bit now. So the bedrock is version 5, and it's present in 2 layers, bedrock and linear features. And then the superficial layer, and I cannot explain why to this day, is version 3 and is really old. It's based on the 1977 paper map that used to be given to students when they were starting their degree courses. What I am hoping, as a lockdown project last year, one of the scientists was experimenting with auto-generalization of features as part of a digital data project. And I'm hoping to release a new 625K superficial map, which is actually based on 50K data auto-generalized. That will really be good if we can do that, because I've found the 1977 data to be very problematical, particularly if there are people who are using it at the wrong scale. So as I've got a captive audience, and I'm hoping there's lots of future geologists, always remember, please, it might be a digital data set, but it has a scale, and you need to work at the right scale for the job you're doing. There are companies who will remain nameless who insist on using this data set for their site-specific work. It's not suitable for that. Okay, so very quickly, BGS soils. This is one of my data sets. It's something that I cut my teeth on as a geologist at BGS. We make it available through EDINA. We also make it available through our MySoil platform, which we are about to withdraw, sadly, but we also make it available through our UXO Soil Observatory. This too is due an update. We'll be moving this to version 8 next year. And if you want any other information about UK soil observatory data sets, they are floating around on the UXO website, but you can ask me questions later on. And the BGS superficial deposit thickness, this is the onshore quaternary thickness model. That is, again, long overdue an update. When we first made it, it wasn't that popular. It wasn't really used. Over time, an awful lot of hydrogeologists and engineers have come to appreciate that it contains a lot of information. I've forgotten the actual metrics now, but there are 13 million data points in that model. And although we managed to make it on a Pentium 2 machine back in 2001. We are currently struggling to remake the data because the amount of data we've now got available is massive. So we're looking at new interpolation methods, and almost 10 years of new borehole data has come in since we made the last version. So it will also require a new uncertainty model. All of those are in play. It's an awful lot of work for us to do, and we are hoping that someone amongst you in the audience will come and join us to help us make some of these data sets more readily available. I'm painfully aware of the time, so I'm just going to quickly nip through the last couple of slides. Use cases. Biggest driver in the last couple of years for people using the Geology Map and wanting updates to the Geology Map, which is the critical thing as far as I'm concerned. Offshore wind has leapt to the front in terms of we need to understand our offshore marine environment. If you've ever made a geological map, either as a student or as a professional, you know how difficult it is when you can see rocks. If you imagine trying to do it where you can't hold your breath and you're underwater, it gets extremely difficult. So the marine environment has always been a slight mystery in terms of the detail that we can bring. However, the multi-generations of multi-beam that are now available and the ability to process huge quantities of backscatter, OLX data, all kinds of information means that the quality of offshore terrain mapping is easily a match for the onshore terrain mapping, which means geologists are now more readily being employed to look at what's going on in our marine environment. So we've had an awful lot of engagement with power companies to look at what are the foundation conditions for offshore marine assets, and then what are the hazards that they need to be resilient to. So that's where a lot of the drivers for offshore investment have come from. Onshore, we're still being dominated by projects like High Speed 2 and rad waste and new nuclear. They are in long-standing projects, and certainly rad waste will continue to be a long-standing project for BGS and for Great Britain as a whole. Certainly in the last couple of years, renewables, so ground source heat and pump storage schemes in Scotland and parts of Wales have also taken off. And again, in terms of a future source of jobs for geologists, these are growth areas. For my part of my working day is acting as a purveyor of data, but I also work as a geoscientist as well. So in the last couple of years, I've been mostly busy looking at aquifer protection, particularly the chalk aquifer. That does involve remapping because of the way we made our maps in the past, and also brownfield reuse, where we have finally started to get people interested in building on brownfield sites rather than constantly building on greenfield sites. So there's an awful lot of areas where geologists are required. You're either required to gather new information, or you're interpreting or reinterpreting what's there so you can advise on alternative uses for a patch of ground, whether that's at surface or buried at depth. Challenges for BGS geology, we're on the last couple of slides now. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the work we're currently doing and have been doing now for about 6 or 7 years is looking back through our systems. We have got rid of all of the systems that might have been using Windows 95 and things like that, but we still have an awful lot of legacy systems, and the object model behind our data is no longer fit for what modern stakeholders require from us. Stakeholders want a lot more information in different ways. They want to be able to understand their data in, shall we say, less traditional methods. And yourselves as geologists, our user base are also evolving. We don't see the same geological skills coming through university, but we see a lot of evolving and rapidly growing other needs and skills. So there's a lot more hard data and uncertainty data required, and that requires different things from us. And we're also now starting to have people where it's non-humans that are interfacing with our data. So again, we're having to change an awful lot of the content to try and address these issues. And then I've put it in at the bottom, resurvey. So when I started 31 years ago, I wasn't quite sure what my geology future would be. And I didn't think 31 years later I'd still be a geologist, but here I am anyway. But when I started 31 years ago, I was told I was probably working on the last resurvey of the UK. One of the things I've started openly saying now is that I was not on the last resurvey of the UK. We probably need another resurvey, but it won't be the traditional resurvey that we're used to. And the last slide is about this. In the last decade, the explosion of sensor data, whether it's LiDAR, such as this EA LiDAR, which is, I think, the 1 meter 2019 data set, whether it's LiDAR or whether it's Earth observation data or drone data, the volume of data has gone up exponentially and the quality of the data has become fantastic. So when you, as a trained geologist, starts to look at this, you'll start to see geological features. And the problem for me as someone who has to try and manage expectations is, with the best will in the world, I can put on a map which should be reasonably good and should match the LiDAR data. But almost straight away, when you start to look at it, you start to see things that are missing or not quite right. So if anyone's out there wondering what a future geologist might be doing, I need some help fixing this map, because this is one which is causing me problems and is quite tricky to resolve. So the future will be surveying, but not necessarily as we've done it traditionally. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Russell. That was a really great presentation. It was, so good to hear about the data and the updates, but I think some really good insight for, the students and researchers that are here today, hopefully, about the future of geology. Really great. I don't see any questions coming in at the moment. So if anyone has questions for Russell, this is your opportunity. So please do put them in for us.
Russell, we have a request for your contact details, if that's all right. If you're allow us to share those, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's no problem. You can actually Google me. There aren't many Russell Lawleys. I think there's about 7 of us in the world, and we all know each other. So there's only one geologist. So
it might be somebody looking for a job, maybe.
That's normally what happens. I get a lot of requests. If I appear anywhere on the screen, I get them. And we are hiring now, so I can't make promises to people, but do keep an eye out. If you want to work in geology, I recommend BGS as a good place to start, manage, and even end your career if you want to. There are opportunities, and we had almost 60 people retire or leave to change their careers last year, so I know that we will be hiring over the next couple of years. So the BGS website is a good place to look for career things. Absolutely. A lot of people are quite negative about geology at the moment in terms of, oh, well, the oil sector is terrible. That's actually not quite the case. I found the market to be quite buoyant for jobs and interesting. So people should take good heart from that. Brilliant. We do have one question. Are there any plans to broaden the 1 to 10,000 coverage? Yes, constantly. So I probably didn't explain it very well. We have a lot more paper content and coverage than we have digital coverage. One of the reasons for that is we lost an awful lot of cartographers about 8 or 9 years ago. So we went from about 20 people who were capturing digital data every day to about 5 people who are capturing digital data every day. And they're also busy doing other things as well. So we have paper content that we still need to capture. We also have active survey teams. We don't have the structured survey that we used to have when I joined. We have what we call a responsive mode survey. So if we have a commercial project such as High Speed 2, which is capturing new information, we will co-fund that work. So a responsive team will go out and will complete 10K sheets in the area. So it's not just the commercial jobs that are getting all the effort. So over time, the 10K coverage should increase, but it is an uphill struggle. If anyone's looked at the Ordnance Survey 10K coverage for Great Britain, we're talking quite a lot of 10K maps. Yeah, it's quite considerable, isn't it? Thanks. Next question is, what's LiDAR? Yeah, so that's light detection and ranging. So it is a laser version of radar. So basically you fire a laser at a surface and you measure when it pings back, when you get a reflection from the surface. LiDAR has been around for quite a while now. What's clever about LiDAR nowadays is that the sophistication of the tools for capturing it has meant that the equipment's got smaller and lighter and smarter and faster, and pre-processing whilst you capture the data has become more and more commonplace. So it is a fantastic way of getting a scan of a feature. We've gone from the days where we would pay a lot of money for a helicopter to fly a scientist and a LiDAR scanner out to a volcano and spend several hours capturing a little strip of data from a volcano, to the point now where I know that quite a lot of police cars in the UK have LiDAR built into them. In fact, an awful lot of modern cars have LiDAR built into their speed control, basically. So LiDAR is everywhere. We use airborne LiDAR, which was flown either for us by the Ordnance Survey or flown for Blue Sky, and it's fantastic. If you are a student out there and you're interested in data, please, please, please learn how to interpret LiDAR and use LiDAR. Guaranteed a job forever.
We have heard of students studying the special effects in film making who fly drones down a street in order to capture LiDAR and add their own special effects CGI stuff on it. It was fascinating.
Yeah, if you can combine the photogrammetry from drones with imagery from drones or LiDAR, you've kind of like covered an awful lot of special effects through to proper spatial science. You will also have very expensive computers because that data gets big very quickly.
Yeah, it does. For people who don't know, we have LiDAR data from the Environment Agency in Digimap. It's open source data, so you can almost do what you like with it. You can get it direct from the Environment Agency, but it's very hard to select just the bits you want. And as you say, Russell, it gets very, very large. So Digimap will allow you to select smaller parts of it. We will increase that coverage as it becomes available, but if you haven't played with LiDAR before, that's maybe a good place to start.
If you're studying geology, most people don't realize that when we make a geological map, it's very rare that a BGS geologist will see rocks exposed. In my 31 years, I think I've mapped about 10 outcrops. We normally get sent to really boring parts of the world where you can't see anything. LiDAR is fantastic because although human eyeballs are great at seeing things in 3D, when you're only 1.67 meters tall, you don't get the 3D perspective that you can do with a computer and a fancy hill shading algorithm. So please do learn how to use it. It's really good. And we use it all over the globe. Yeah,
I think that's good advice. Yeah. Have we got any more questions? I can't see any more coming in yet, but if you have one, please fire away now.
As there's no questions, my plan for the rest of the session was just to give a quick demonstration of Geology Roam, our application where you can browse all of the maps that Russell's been talking about. So I'll just carry on with that, and if any questions come in, feel free to interrupt me, Emma. Just give me a second while I share my screen.
Well, Russell, we have a quick question here. Is there any plan to make mine data available or added to geological maps?
Yep, so I didn't cover any of our other products. So we have for most of our commercial products, we have an openly available summary version of the data. So if you look up non-coal mining hazard in Google, it should take you to the BGS website where we've got dedicated data sets for non-coal mining. So if your query concerns coal-related mining, obviously we automatically point you towards the Coal Authority. We do work with them extensively on their data set, but we cover the non-coal mining. So there's a lot of chalk and sandstone mining that goes on in the UK. You can access the free version of that data. As academics, you can also access the full licensable version of that data set. It's just you have to jump through an email hoop to get hold of it.
Lovely, thank you. Right, Viv, do you want to go ahead and I'll just butt in wherever I think you might need a bit of extra.
Absolutely, and Russell, hopefully you can stay for this short section.
Yeah.
You butt in if there's anything you want to point out to people.
I'll just be spotting errors, that's the problem.
Okay, so this is Geology Digimap. So there are 3 application options here. We're going to look at Roam, where you can browse the maps, select which features you want to display, you can annotate them and print them. If you want the actual geospatial data to take into something like ArcGIS or QGIS to do some analysis on, Geology Data Download is the area where you would go to do that. We also have a third button here called Web Services. So this is where you can take a link and put it into a different application such as ArcGIS, and you can then get a stream of the geological mapping images and perhaps combine that with your own data. We can also use these and take them into other Digimap collections. So for example, it's quite a popular one to take the Ordnance Survey web map service and combine it with the historic maps. So I've got a few of these web map services set up in Roam, so I can very quickly show you that as well. So let's select Geology Roam. So this is the opening screen of the viewer. The base maps is where you would select the different maps that Russell's been talking about. So the 1 to 625K is what we're looking at now. As we zoom in, the available base maps will change. So as we zoom in further, you'll be able to select from, for example, the soil maps and so on, or the hydrogeology. So I've zoomed in another couple of scales, and I've got 3 options here. But before I move on, I want to open this map content section on the left-hand side. Once this section loads up, you'll see that this is where you can choose which layers you want to view. So within here, I've got the top box is the onshore geology, and the offshore one is what Russell referred to as marine geology. So I can actually just choose to switch that off if I'm not interested in that. And if I select this little arrow next to the onshore geology, you can then see I've got the option to turn off layers if they're not of interest to me. So if I only wanted the bedrock, for example, I can turn off those other layers there. If I select that arrow next to bedrock, that's where I get an actual legend of the rocks that are on this map. One other way to customize this is with this slider bar at the top here. So I can just change the opacity and take out the underlying Ordnance Survey place mapping that's underneath that. Let's zoom in a little bit further and see what other base maps become available to us. So at this scale, you can see again, it's popped back in. It's remembered that I've taken off the marine geology, the offshore mapping. So you can see I've got now looking at the 1 to 250K onshore mapping. But as well as that, there's lots of different base maps available. So if you're interested in soils, I could select one of the soil base maps to view. I think this is a useful time to show you this little 2-up option on the top toolbar. And this is where I can compare 2 base maps at the same scale. So I could compare the soil calcium carbonate on one window with the soil strength on the left window. So the 2-up is a potentially useful tool for you. Now let's actually, before I move on, I'm going to zoom in a bit further in this location. And you know, Russell showed you the coverage maps for the 1 to 10 and 1 to 25K. I'm just going to show you what happens if you hit an area where we don't have coverage for that. I think I need to move in a bit further. Okay, so at this point in East Scotland, it's given me options of 1 to 50,000 or 1 to 10,000. And it tells me there's no 1 to 10 or 1 to 25K available in this area. So I'm going to show you again later where you can see a coverage map akin to what Russell showed you. So when you, unfortunately, when you get that error message, you know, you just have to try and check the coverage map to see where you should go. So,
Viv, can I just add that the base maps thing will tell you what is available at that scale. It doesn't necessarily tell you what's available in that area. So you have to pick. It's just that has to be based on scale because it will apply right across the whole area. That's all.
Yeah, so these are the maps that are suitable for display at this scale, but
yes.
Yeah, as Emma says, that doesn't necessarily mean there is coverage in that base map. Okay, cool. So let's go to Lulworth and select one of those options. Okay, so we are looking at the 1 to 10,000 here. So again, I've got my customization, I have my map content options on the left-hand side there. So I'll stick with the default. There's lots of other options in Roam. For example, we have drawing tools where you can annotate with markers and shapes and text, measurement tools. I won't go into those in any detail. We have an introductory webinar which can tell you a bit more about that stuff next week. There's this map information on the left-hand sidebar as well, which tells you exactly which maps are on display right now. So that's certainly a useful one to keep your eye on. The other thing I want to show you is this active legend. Now we've got a couple of options for finding out what rocks you're actually looking for. On the top toolbar, there's a little information button. If you select that and just click on the rock that you're interested in, it will give you the information from the BGS lexicon of rock units, rock unit and rock type, the era and so on. But we also have this active legend, which for some reason is not populating right now. Okay, so if you're interested in the bedrock, so I want to know, okay, show me examples on the map of this broadstone clay, and it's then highlighting those. Hopefully that's visible, but it kind of highlighted those over. Unfortunately, they were under my little scale part there. So this is just a kind of, an easier way to identify what rocks you're looking at. So if I click on this yellow one here, it then jumps to the point in the legend to tell me that that is Portstown Chalk Formation. So just wanted to make you aware that that option is there, as well as the get feature information here. And the final additional feature that we have in Geology Roam are these geological photos. So this is a database of images which came from BGS. I can't remember many details about the database. I think it's geologically significant areas. Is that fair to say, Russell?
I think it is. It's probably geoscenic, and this is something where we've tried multiple times to get the user communities to contribute, and I think we still need to do some work on this one. But it's nice to see it here. So thank you for putting it in.
Okay.
Russell, I have a question actually, Russell. Do you know about the Geograph database, which is I think is supposed to be photographs of every square kilometre in the UK?
Yes.
Not complete. It's that kind of idea here, isn't it? And
yes.
You want the user engagement. I don't know how up to date Geograph is, or whether they too have trouble getting people to contribute. There are obviously some fans who do a lot.
There are. We do actually have an active. You can sign up on our iGeology platform. You can sign up to be a contributor, where you can directly send me edits and corrections and photos of exposures. And we do have a fan base who regularly contact us and send stuff through, which is much appreciated. These are surprisingly hard to manage because, of course, you do have to be careful if you're revealing to the public all crowdsourced data. So we have to have a human who acts as a filter, who checks what was sent. And I won't give you any more details about some of the photos we've been sent.
I can imagine there's probably quite a lot of sunbathing around the Jurassic Coast.
Yes, yes, there is. That's exactly that. Moving on.
The last thing which I was going to show you was this overlays panel. The Roam clients vary depending on the Digimap collection. So we don't have too many pre-prepared overlays that are suitable for use with the geology data. But what you will find in this menu is this WMS tab. And this is where you could add in a feed of mapping data from another provider. So for example, I've got a few set up here. This is a Scottish Natural Heritage Renewables web map service. So I've used this to visualize onshore wind farm proposals, for example. So if I turn this on, and let's zoom into Scotland somewhere. Okay, it's a little bit tricky to see with all the different coloured polygons, but if I take down the opacity of our geological data and up the opacity of those wind proposals, what you see is these ones here, the yellow, red, blue ones, these are a visualization of the areas where there are either wind farm proposals that have been applied for, where they're scoping, where they've been approved, and so on. So it's just an example that, the WMS option does let you bring in a stream of mapping data from other providers, or indeed, if you wanted, for example, to see the aerial maps that we hold within Digimap Aerial, you can also take the web map service from there and do that. So just alerting you to that possibility. If you don't have any analysis to do and you just want to visualize the data, that's potentially a useful tool for you. Now I'm going to zoom in a little and show you one last thing. So I'm in this the coast of Ayrshire. If I click this arrow on the top toolbar, it says use this area and data download. So that's going to open our data download application with this area highlighted for you. The data download process is a step process, the first one being to select your area of interest. So I've got my shaded area there, and following on from that, it's a matter of looking at the different categories of data. So for example, if you're interested in the 1 to 50,000 onshore, soil parent material and so on, just select all of the data that you want. There are some in here which you can't visualize in Roam, for example, the borehole index and the lexicon of rock units. And then you just add them to basket, and then it's a matter of stepping through the options and ordering your data. And data tends to be ready fairly quickly unless you've asked for a huge area of GB. So that is all I wanted to show you about Geology Downloads, a very quick run through, but hopefully that's been useful. And huge thanks to Russell and Emma, and over to you guys for any more questions. So we have a hand raise. Lisa, let me unmute you so you can.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I hope this isn't a silly question, but in the gentleman's presentation, there was that nice LiDAR image with the geology overlay. Is that something you can do in Roam in this system, or is that not something that you could do? Is that part of that, what did you say, the WMS thing? Or have I got that wrong? Do you have to export the data and sort of construct it yourself if you wanted to create something like that?
Yes, Lisa, you're right.
What you want to do, Lisa? Sorry.
But Lisa's asking if we can visualize the LiDAR data in Roam, and that's something that we can't do. So we have a hill shading overlay for some of them, but that's not the same. It looks similar, but it's not. So if you want to recreate the image that Russell's shown us with the LiDAR data, you'd need to download the LiDAR data and process it yourself.
Okay.
It's just too unwieldy for us to do online as an online visualization service.
Okay, thank you.
It's very large. It takes a lot of processing.
Okay, thank you for your help.
We have one question here. Any plans to add a 3D viewer, geology and topography, for example? For Digimap, no, not yet. But we've taken note that it's been mooted there. That's a good idea. I think to do an online service with that would be quite a substantial undertaking for us anyway.
It is, if I might come in here, it is kind of like available through BGS services. Yeah. It is quite an undertaking, I'll warn you in advance. If you want to see the Geology 50K data, the BGS Geology 50K data draped over a terrain, then our Geology of Britain viewer on the BGS website does exactly that. And you can also see cross sections and boreholes in 3D. It works really well. I recommend you have a good broadband link, and I recommend you use a standard Mac or a PC with a mouse, because flying around it using a tablet or a mobile phone is way too complicated for this old man. So I have to use a mouse and an ordinary PC. It is really, really good way of learning about geology. The other thing I'm going to put on that, though, if you become a professional geologist, if you are a professional geologist, whilst the 3D looks great, please refer back to the actual data at the right scale if you're working on a site. I've had to rescue more than one professional geologist who's made the mistake of assuming that the 3D image is everything they need. It isn't. You do need to look at the background data as well.
Good point, Russell. Yeah, we should add that while Digimap can supply the BGS data, actually the BGS website itself also has a huge amount of information and resources on it, so it's definitely worth exploring. It's really useful. There's only so much we can do with Digimap because the economics just don't necessarily stack up, but BGS have a lot of stuff that's worth looking at, so do explore it.
Yeah, I will second that. Please do come and have a look, and please do tell us if there's stuff you want to see and can't find.
Yeah, super. Right, I don't think we have any more questions coming, Viv.
Okay, then just thank you again to Russell and to Emma and to everyone for coming along. And I'll follow up tomorrow with a recording. And if you have any questions that you think of after the session, do just get in touch. You should have my email from the Zoom invite. So thanks again, and I'll end the meeting.